Good morning. It's Thursday, January 27th, 2022, 9:30 a.m., and we are now in session for the Middlesex County Budget Committee, Day 2. So I'm going to call this meeting to order, and I'm going to ask if there's a disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none, we're going to start right away with our departmental presentations. And good morning and welcome to our Director of Planning, Dirk Vanderwerf, and the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Madam Warden. Nice to see people in person. So I guess if you'd like, we just start with the quick overview presentation. Planning Department, next slide, please. I think many of you are familiar with our staff complement as a number of the planners and our forestry officer work with local municipalities, and you see them in your councils at various times. We do have a couple of people off on leave, tending to more important things. We've had a few babies in the department and some contract staff to backfill on that. Next slide, please. I won't go into a lot of detail, but overall, what is it that the department does? There's the county planning role in terms of the county's official plan, and also a number of things that the province has delegated, authorities that the province has delegated to the county level of government. The department also works with each of your local municipalities to provide local planning services, and there's an agreement in place that defines those service levels. We also do mapping and GIS, and we do it for the department, for the county, and then there are components of it, sort of the backbone, if you will, for a lot of the work that's done at the municipalities, whether it's SAB work, that sort of information, through a centralized, an ELA, Enterprise License Agreement, that we entered in. And then finally, there's woodlands. The department manages the county forest, county-owned forest, and also administers the Woodlands Conservation Bylaw and the Weed Act, both for the county and for each local municipality where Mark Brown is appointed as the local weed inspector. And then why do we do it? We support county council and local municipal councils to make decisions that really do have, we believe, long-term implications for not only the protection of the environment and agricultural areas, but the growth and development of the community across Middlesex County. In terms of some highlights from last year, we have continued on the official plan background work. Of course, I think I say this to you almost every year, but the provincial changes have continued, and there's a few new ones at the end of the year, which I'll make back to. As you know, there is strong development occurring right across the county, all types of applications, everything from land division consents to larger subdivisions and condominiums. We've also really worked through COVID. COVID highlighted what I think we knew in the back of our minds already, is that we need to be able to provide information to citizens, developers, builders, so they can sort of self-serve. So we've developed for each municipality sort of planning application guides to each type of application. And we sort of did the backbone, and then we customized it with your staff so it reflects your local processes. And then we've also we've done a soft launch on this. We haven't advertised a lot because we just want to make sure we've got everything behind what we've got. Public zoning is publicly available now, so you can look up any property and find out the exact specifics of yourself rather than having to call a local municipal staff. As I said, it's been launched for almost a month and a half now, and we're just working out a few of the. And then we've built some capacity in our staff. 2020 was a tough year. We filled 5 positions, and we've, other than some leaves, as I mentioned, we've kept people, and as you build that rapport with people and they work with staff, really have, I feel we're in a better position. Please. In terms of the next two kind of blend together in terms of opportunities and challenges, to be honest. Just keeping pace and being responsive to development is both an opportunity and it is challenging, not only for the planners and our technicians, but for your municipal staff, of course. Really need to finalize the official plan update, and County Council is going to do more of that very shortly. The Planning Advisory Committee has been meeting, and there's another meeting in a few weeks, and then we'll sort of working hard start the sort of public consultation, and you'll hear more of that very shortly. Some of those service enhancements, we would like to continue with that. And then the last thing that is both a bit daunting but exciting is undertaking a digital planning process implementation. That was funded by the province through the Municipal Modernization Program, and will essentially allow applicants to digitally apply, monitor. Staff will do digital circulations to sort of automate that process that now, of course, planning has traditionally been a very manual process. And the challenge is just building on that. It is busy, and just keeping up with development for staff and for municipalities is not easy. Official plan update, there's work to be done there, and challenges with that. Expectations, just both from applicants and from municipalities and councils, and just what can be done and timing. Special projects, and then just continuing with the maturation, if that's the right word, of staff, and also retaining. And then highlights, just sort of at a high level, basically looking to continue the same service level. I did include a proposed addition of one full-time person partway through the year, planner. And really what we're hoping to do there is have a dedicated person that works on policy. So when, I'll give the example of the last two the two provincial bills that were just released at the end of the year. I'd like to have that person be able to examine them, do a report to county council, then do 8 reports. They might go in either that person's name or with your local planner, and get that right before local councils faster, more incrementally than the way that we've been. Special project funding, maintained money in there to not only finish the county official plan, but some of the other projects. And then the clean water project was included. And I didn't put the wording on this slide, but I did note in the wording, I just wanted to make the committee and council aware that that program has been funded through funds realized from prosecutions. And of course, we don't know the prosecutions that are going to come and how much funds are going to come in. Also, during COVID, the special offenses system has ground to a halt, so there's a bit of a delay there. So this would be the last year that at present we have funding in that capital account for. So next year, either we'll have to, council or the committee would have to make decisions whether they want to fund. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. And I think throughout the last few years, planning has really been a focus along a lot of people with the additional growth that we've had. And I can imagine, I know we struggle at the local level just to keep up with the applications and get them out in time. So I know at the county level, it must be the same as well. So kudos to you and your department to keeping things moving along.
Thank you.
Any questions for Dirk? Councillor Burghardt-Jessen?
Great, thank you, Warden. It's funny. Well, I've said this before, just as I was sitting in the warden's chair, I certainly got to know more of the planning department. And I've said this to your group, never thought that planning was necessarily as exciting, that it always tended to be dry. But actually, I really did learn so much from your group. And it is an exciting time to, as the warden said, as the county grows and everything, watching it transform into something, using your modernization and all that. I did want to speak to the clean water project, because that is something that I do think that we should be investing in. And if we're going to continue this year, which I hope that we will be, I would maybe suggest in preparation for next year is bringing Upper Thames back for another presentation. I know that they're always keen to talk about that project and just the work that they're doing in the county in general. But it might be a good idea get an update on that project and a better understanding for whoever's around the horseshoe as to what the project is and the benefits of it to our residents in the county.
And I think, as you say, Councillor, bringing the Conservation Authority in will be useful, not only just for that one, but for the updates on what's happening with the Conservation Authorities and their funding and how that's affecting our levy and budgets as well. Any other questions for Dirk? G.O. Rayburn?
Failed yesterday to push my button, and I got in trouble from Greg. He's much bigger than me, so I'm going to follow the rules. I raise it here, at Dirk's presentation because it's front of mind to me, but it really, what I'm about to talk about affects a number of departments. We need to think about having a line item that's about succession planning and education. We have that. It's buried in some of the budgets, but it's more acutely needed and probably more acutely required to demonstrate to council what we're investing in that. And also we need to be able to show council that we're investing early and we have a plan for each departments. And so I say it here just because we really do have a lot of trouble in some departments attracting staff. And then senior staff is even harder to attract, believe me. In the old days, it was the opposite. It was easy to find someone that wanted to be in a management position and had all this experience and come work for the county of Middlesex. But you're not in that position anymore, just globally. And so supporting the group below the people you see at council with education and with training and those types of things is something that you do have to invest in, and we have been investing in, but I think we need to be more transparent about it. Like in this department, we've been talking to our senior planner below Dirk about education, management training, because it's not just about, it's almost exclusively not about education in the department. It's about management training and about learning how to manage in a municipal government. And so this is an area where we're going to be investing this year in helping bring that along with the subsequent agreements about, a sliding scale depending on how long you're with the county. But the intent is to get people comfortable knowing that there's a succession plan, invest in those people so they stick with us and want to be, and then when the time comes, then you do have the tools available to you, as opposed to being a subject matter expert with no real management training. So this is something I think is going to be a focus this year in all the departments, and we'll probably have to draw that out a little bit. Like maybe we even talk about that at the end, about whether or not we put a line item instead, like whether we pull that out of what I'm talking about in planning, whether we pull that out and add it into the other areas and call it something so council knows. And it's not only this council, the next council knows.
Yeah, I think professional development is the term that you could use, because it would mean junior or senior. And I'm a big believer in training as much as you can and educating people on the job, because I know from my own experience that, planners are hard to get. Good ones are hard to get.
Anyone's are hard to get, but yes.
And I shared that example the other day of somebody that I was talking to that had taken a job totally out of planning because the last few years she wasn't feeling connected. So hopefully, the times will change, and when people feel that there is some advancement for them or some education, I think that become more attractive again.
To do, Warden, is separate out, and you're absolutely right, we need to do it through all parts of the organization, but I'm trying to separate out in a very finite way the difference between regular education and management training. Because you could, for example, educate a senior planner at a master's level in planning and they could be a disaster as a manager because they're a subject matter expert. And so what I'm finding is management training is also something that we need, and we can talk about every department and talk about where we need it. But management training is something that actually, without it, costs us money. And we sometimes make a mistake in individual departments of thinking because someone's a subject matter expert, they're going to be a great manager. And often that's not the case. There's often an inverse relationship to that. And the other thing I would say to council too is that management training is something that is hard to do in a short period of time. You need to sort of like have it be integrated into your succession plan over a course of like 3 to 4 years as opposed to 3 to 4 months. Because you don't become a great manager, or you don't think about some of those broader management principles just in a finite amount of time. It has to be over thinking about how it integrates into your current job. So we've been doing a lot of that in planning, just thinking through so that succession plan is there where the person can see how it integrates and also contribute in a higher way.
Councillor DeVee?
Thank you, Warden. I am totally in agreement with this conversation. In my experience, something that happens at the annual review with the employee and the conversation in doing that. To your point about does everyone want to be, why is it hard to move people in when you're looking? It's a function of the supply and the demand, but also changing expectations about how much time people spend at work and what they want to do there and how much of their they want to commit to that. So not everyone wants to take a certain path. Other people result in that, and other people want. So I was going to ask the question: where is that money now in here? Is it does it appear in the HR budget as, or is it in each?
It'll be in each
benefit?
department's education component, or in education component, and it's mixed in with a whole bunch of other things like conferences, and it's a catch-all. And
Okay.
so and the other thing too, just about your point about annual reviews, is a good one. However, you have to realize, and I know you realize, that in some organizations, often there's a perverse incentive to not encourage that. And it's almost like, because it can happen, because, nobody really wants to think about success, in my job, and then you have to think about it. We're lucky that our department heads have thought about it a lot, and thought about who else can, because it also helps them in the interim. And so I think there's conversations like that, but we have a lot of work to do on our broader organization. Like, we really had 2 succession plans in my time here. And I've been here so long now that we've implemented both of them. And now we need to sort of think about that next level. Like, everybody knows I'm extremely proud of this next level that we have in place. But whenever you have a younger next level, it's harder to think about the level below, because you think Marcy's going to be here forever because she's like 30. But you have to think about succession, even if it's not about age, it's about other opportunities. So we have to think about things differently. And I really, it's not this council I'm most worried about, it's the next council. Let's make sure that the next council knows you've invested in that, and that they should keep investing in that. Line item in there for that. Because right now it is, right, Cindy? It's just a catch-all. But training is mostly subject. Yeah. Content, yeah.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, the development.
Mm-hmm.
Through the chair, yes, in response to the CAO, if you look, for instance, in the planning, there's lines where it would be convention line, training and development, and also you can go into travel expenses. Usually those lines are where you will find that we're able to support our staff, whether it's a convention or training directly.
There's an element of that too, Warden, that we don't often capture. Like, Dirk, I'll use you as an example. You're a good example. I mean, you took the MPA program, right? And you had time off work to do that. You did a lot of it on your own time, but you had time off work to do some else. We don't count that in there anywhere, of course, but that is a contribution council's making to succession. There wasn't a lot of travel for Dirk, but there was time. And often council loses track of just how much we are investing in succession, how much more we have to. I say succession, but you know what I mean, right? It's really about generating that next level of management that's ready for it. And so if someone came along right now and said, Bill, I want to take the MPA program, this is how I would evaluate it. Are you someone that I see in line, senior manager here at the county? Because that's an expensive thing, and council needs to know just how expensive that is. We don't just do it willy-nilly. Expensive thing. Can I afford the time for you to do it? Because some of that time is going to be in work time. And then, do I think that you're going to be around long enough and be the type of person, as Ina said it correctly. Not everybody has that royal jelly to want to be a manager. Some of them just see it as an upgraded content expert, and that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for content is almost not as important as great management skills when you get to a certain level. So anyways, that's what we're looking for.
I think it's difficult because not everybody wants to be a leader, but I think people given training become better managers because they know how to do that. So I think, you know, even if somebody just said, I don't want to be the head of the department, I just want to know how to manage something, that's value. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
we need those people. So,
Especially,
yeah.
we need that in the secondary level, like at our nursing homes. Because it's not even just about, like, we call it management people, but their relationship, how to have a proper office in a relationship. You're not just doing your own thing when you have to, like, you don't have financial incentives to make people help people.
I agree. Not everybody is going to be a leader, but I think everybody needs to be know that they are a valued member of the team that we're willing to invest in, no matter what that looks like, and that there's opportunity. And where I may not be the one to advance to a management level, well, but I do see my coworkers are. So it's all for creating that environment where everybody's valued and knows that there's opportunity. I don't know whether Dirk should feel, you know, you brought up succession planning, you know, when Dirk is sitting in there.
Well, no, I
know.
this
I'm
isn't
just teasing.
Through the warrant, I would notice that he didn't say 30 when he was talking to Dirk.
This isn't a conversation that we
No.
have without Dirk. And in fact, we have it with all our managers, regardless of age or opportunity. We really do need to know what the next step is.
Well, and I think it's an important discussion for government to have. To your point that you said at the beginning of all this, there was never ever there never used to be a problem attracting people to positions within the organization, but now there's lots of competition out there, and we have to understand that you know, whereas before it was you know, to say you worked for a level of government, there was a certain cachet to that, and now there's competition out there that is taking people from that.
Well, I think there was also a certain stigma. Like, so for example, if I was thinking about certain departments, I won't name one, but about a department, I wouldn't have included the private sector in my thinking of competition. I would have thought about Huron, I would have thought about Lambton. That would have been my whole sphere of influence around who I'm going to lose someone to 5 years ago. Today, I think that there's no competition for us. I think that all the competition is private for almost all our departments. Honestly, almost all our departments. Maybe not ambulance, but every other department. I'm thinking about the private sector now, and that is a much bigger sphere of influence that you have to attract. And the good news is that council and our senior management team has done a good job of creating that sense of why would you want to go anywhere else? We've provided, you know, like Jessica can go on for hours about all the things that we do to help make this the best place to work. And so it's not just about money. It's about, you know, as you said, let's make sure everyone feels supported, and in whatever way they need to be supported, from, you know, in your terms, like in the early stages, and from mental health all the way to what I'm talking about in terms of succession. So, you know, that's really what we've got in place, but we need to have a line item really drawn out that doesn't move for succession here, or development. I think management development at some point, just so it doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
There is a lot in the literature right now about changing cultures and about how people define work, and how you define an employer of choice, and to your point, Bill, about development and training, and the value piece. You need people look at a lot more than what is my paycheck going to be like, what does my vacation look like, and all that. There is a lot of soft stuff around those decisions now, and point is really well taken, because we need to make sure that we are an employer of choice for first on that, because the competition is not just here on. Exactly as you say, I mean, we've talked about that with respect to your staff. We're one of many choices for people. I'm not saying, I mean, I don't know that I'm not suggesting that we are settling. I know it's hard to recruit, but that's partly why it takes a long time, because it well, so.
Thank you. Any other questions for, Dirk? Brian?
Thank you. Through the warden, this is not about education. It's just a question on the woodlots. We've had Mark come in and do several presentations, and one was Phragmites, talking about doing the cleaning of the ditches and spraying and all that. Where does that cost brought in? Is that through transportation? Like, because there's a cost to these reports that he brings in. Where's the cost actually go?
Through the warden. So the woodlands category would be all of Mark's time in this. The actual Phragmites, we did a pilot 2 years ago. This past year, the weather didn't cooperate, so it didn't work out, just with the amount of rain and the water in the ditch at the right time. That cost is, there's a portion of it that goes into the county, the budget, and then the other part is in the transportation.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm, because we do get a number of reports from Mark, and there's cost to a lot of his reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Burkhart?
On the cell phones, just quite an increase. Is now everybody getting their own cell phone? Is that something that, or?
For the warden, it's actually the bottom line number, I believe, is the same. Change in the way that we're doing, and help me out this. If you look, we used to have it in telephone, one line. It's gone down from 50 to 21. So we're sort of, I think, making all the departments match in terms of our accounting practices, where I think I just had it all on the phones before.
Cindy, you had a comment?
Yes, through the chair. Actually, we just found out that we got phase 3 of modernization funding, and one of the projects is for the housing. I was wondering if you could just briefly talk about that one, Dirk.
Thank you. Yeah, so I don't know if, I don't think that's gone to council yet, so it'll be on the next agenda, but we did apply through the modernization program to undertake a housing study, and it would be sort of twofold. One is just to sort of step back and examine obtainable and affordable housing countywide, and sort of both in terms of data, what the programs are, who does what, some comparison with other jurisdictions, other service managers, and how that all operates. And then the second part, which I think is why we felt it sort of fit in the modernization program, is to be able to develop a portion of the website that tells the average person complex system, and where do you go if you're in this particular circumstance, where do you apply, who do you ask. Right now it's not clear as far as we can tell, so it's sort of those two parts of the program. So that was just received that, and so we'll after this sort of budget process is done, Cindy and others and I are going to sit down and sort of map out what that.
Councillor Ropp?
Thank you, through the warden. To that point, in that report, will it actually say what affordable housing is? I mean, I just saw an ad for a new house there at Hyde Park coming in. It's $1.4 million for this house. So, like, what is affordable housing now? Does it go up the way regular housing does, and then it's not affordable? That's why I just wondered if is that going to be included in the report, some kind of a definition?
Yeah, we will make sure it does. There are provincial definitions, and you're absolutely correct. They tie to averages and being a certain distance below those averages. But as the averages have increased so much, incomes, my view, that distance is greater. So there's probably a technical affordable housing number, and then there's probably a practical affordable housing number.
Great. Any other questions? Seeing none, I just want to thank Dirk, and I do want to say that I do enjoy planning. I do like that, even though I said it was never my dream job. That was a quote that was thrown back at me a while ago. But I do think that I'm enjoying my time on the Planning Advisory Committee, and I want to thank Dirk for his patience and his time to explain to people and go through different issues that we're discussing on that. So thank you. And moving on to Middlesex London Emergency Medical Services, and that will be Neil. Is he?
Through the chair, I'm just going to go see if the team is here.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I think we're ready to go with our next presentation, and I would like to welcome our members of the Middlesex London Emergency Medical Services, and welcome Chief Robertson. If you want to take a minute to introduce your team, that would be great. And then the floor is all yours.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Warden, and members of the committee. So, good morning. We will start with Deputy Chief, and then we'll work down. Okay, thank you, through you, Madam Warden, to the committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to present the 2022 Middlesex London Paramedic Service budget. I'll just go through, I know you have your packages, so we'll go through a bit of the slide deck with regards to the highlights. So a bit of our service itself, we have over 330 full-time and part-time paramedics. In 2021, which is again a new sort of bar that we hit, we responded to over 100,000 calls. Our initial projections are that we're looking at approximately 113,000, which when I first started here in Middlesex in 2011, we were somewhere around 40 to 50,000. So you can see the growth that we continue to experience. On our vehicles at peak, so that's at when we have the most on, we are at 30 units operating out of 13 stations. Last year, due to the support of Middlesex Council and the province of Ontario, we implemented a specialized paramedic bus, which has and continues to support COVID-19 operations. Today, they're out vaccinating, as you've seen them in your communities. We also have a community paramedicine program, which members will remember is 100% funded through the province, as well as a bariatric transport unit and our neonatal intensive care transport unit, which again is also 100% funded. So current and future opportunities, one of the areas, again, familiar to council is direct delivery of land ambulance dispatch to gain system improvements and processes, and acting as we've discussed before as a system navigator, because all calls coming into the system are coming in through 911, and we often don't feel that the best resource is being dispatched to those calls. Community paramedicine also plays an important role in providing patients with improved and enhanced access to care, and certainly trying to avoid unnecessary emergency department visits and admission to the hospital. Changing provincial health care through the Ontario Health Teams, that continues to expand, and also looking at the role that with the Ontario Health Team, which we are part of, how community paramedics and paramedics can assist in that new health care reform. The current partnership with the Canadian Mental Health Association on the diversion project, that remains in place, but we're also looking down the road to treat and defer and treat and release on scene patients that we don't have to transport to the emergency department, that could be best dealt with in the residence, or again referred to their family health team or to another healthcare practitioner. And again, it's about trying to best utilize the right resource at the right time for the right patient. And then again, as I've said earlier, is that we continue to be engaged in COVID-19 vaccination clinics within Middlesex County and today in the City of London, and we'll continue on with that. And that is 100% funded through COVID one-time dollars. So on our 2022 financial challenges, obviously this year, as most years, we are looking at provincial funding uncertainty. That's not necessarily a good or a bad sign. It's just we're obviously dealing with not knowing where our budget will go. And we are dealing with a provincial election in June. Increased call volume and offload delays is causing pressure on our system. the impact with implementing the Ontario Ombudsman's report into investigations into land ambulance service delivery. I've briefed council on that before. So the province continues to work through the 50-odd recommendations from the Ombudsman's report and how it will impact us. Insurance costs are rising, and again, as they are for all municipalities in the province due to COVID and due to ongoing costs. So that's passed on to us. COVID-19 and associated funding uncertainties, obviously supply chain issues, increased costs to obtain supplies, that's impacting us as well. And again, the supply chain uncertainties and the inflation, additional training costs to meet clinical and occupational health and safety guidelines, that's always increasing, especially the more calls we do, the more risk we incur, and so we need to be on top of this. Again, yesterday was Bell Let's Talk Day, so very important, and again, so presumptive PTSD legislation, and council has and continues to be supportive of this, and I know our staff appreciate it, but there's still lots of work we need to do. The one-year funding lag, again, challenges, again, council, because whatever increase you approve and the city approves, you have to bear in the first year, and then hope that the province comes to the table. We're also in collective bargaining and have been for most of, I'll say, the latter half of 2021, and to date, with collective bargaining for the paramedics and for our logistics section as well. While we have some budgeted funds, until that collective agreement is achieved and ratified, that still remains an uncertain expenditure. The reserve accounts, as council is aware, are almost depleted. And the last, again, is a theme that we've identified in prior years where when you look at other emergency services, especially if I can use the City of London as an example, we're not supported by development charges. Sorry, it's included in our budget, but in the cities, it's a separate line, as well as any collective agreement costs are outside of, say, when you look at police, or fire as an example, their budget is just their budget, does not include any incidentals or additional costs, where ours is wrapped up and rolled up into one. Next slide, please. So again, some of the budget pressures we just talked about, call volume offloads, provincial funding uncertainty, and continued impact of COVID. Next, please. And again, other pressures, fleet and liability insurance, presumptive legislation, and then increasing size. So, or increasing systems, so it's size, risk mitigation, and so on and so on. And again, the highlights of the proposed changes that you have before you are the addition of 4 new 12-hour ambulances to address call demand in the City of London. And by doing that, it also relieves the burden of pulling county ambulances into the city, and so we can try to maintain your coverage in the county as well. Increases reflect additional costs for payroll, employee benefits to support proposed staffing level increases. Increases to vehicle operational costs commensurate to enhanced fleet size. So in other words, the more staff we're adding, the more vehicles we have to add as well, and so therefore there are maintenance, repairs, and so on. There are also increases in field training and paramedic education and risk management, and increase to the corporate insurance program as well that have been, again, a flow through that we're seeing. So there are also increased training costs for paramedics to meet clinical practice guidelines, health and safety, increase in consumable and medical equipment. Again, we are seeing that increase year over year. And the one thing I'll tell the committee that we did before Omicron hit its peak, we went to the market and we stocked up on a 90-day supply of everything we stock and utilize to get ahead of the curve, and that has proved beneficial. The good part is we're in a brand new year, so a 3-month rolling supply is going to get used throughout the year, but then we also beat the market before it started depleting. Obviously, increased costs to support the fleet I've talked about, reflect additional costs for rent and operational support expenditures. We also have increased to the following areas to support paramedic operations. So as our system grows, so do the need for our contracted support services in IT, HR, and finance. We're also, as council is aware and this committee is aware, there are strategic planning investments. We're undergoing a strategic 5-year plan. So that is important. Administrative and employee support services and additional resources for paramedic health. The one area that I don't think is on the slide, and I just want to flag as well, there are 2 additional operational superintendents that are part of this year's funding package as well, because again, as we add more paramedics, we also need to ensure that the frontline supervision is also adjusted to make sure that we have supervisors as well. Key capital investments in 2022. So again, we're going through the equipment and fleet renewal, purchase of emergency vehicles, and replacement of computer hardware as the life cycle timeline renewal. The committee and council members may remember as well last year you improved vehicles for the budget. Those vehicles are actually just about to be delivered. They are a year and about 3 months late. And that is due to the chip issues that you're hearing globally with the shortage of vehicles, the chassis for the ambulances, and so on and so forth. I think, and I'm going to look to Commander Gilbert, I think in February we're expecting 9 deliveries from 2021. So in between last year and this year, we expect, I'll say, just under 20 new vehicles to be brought online. So I'm flagging that so you don't think we spent 20 vehicles. It's just because of the delay in getting inventory and access to the vehicles that all the vendors are backed up, and this is what we're seeing. So the summary of the budget is there. I know you've received it in advance. You've got your hard copy print-off, so I'll just, acknowledge that it is there. It's based upon the traditional categories that we've had year over year. We've gone from a 47 million approved in 2021, and if I am correct, this includes the addition that council approved in the fall of 2021 for the additional 3 12-hour vehicles. Included that to make sure that we got that increased council approved amount into the Ministry of Health, so then when we got our funding envelope in 22, it would be at 50%. As you may recall that the ministry looks at what council has approved, even if you've done a secondary improvement, that's what they want to see, and so that's how we try to get ahead of the curve. So this year we are proposing, subject to your review and your recommendation, and ultimately council's approval, a budget for 2022 in the amount of $87,694.96. Next, please. And again, future of Middlesex Law and Paramedic Service, so it's just some key themes. Again, familiar to this committee and council, dispatch reform provincially. And I know CAO Mr. Rayburn has continued to brief you on that area. The Ontario operating under a couple of umbrellas of funding. First of all, the community paramedics and long-term care, which is roughly a $6 million investment over 3 years. So we have another 2 years to go on that. We've also got the home, which is a contracted service, and Coast, both of which are scheduled right now to complete as of March 31st, 2022. And those are contracted through community health, potentially make some announcements, we believe, before the writ is dropped and the provincial election is underway for potential expansion of community paramedicine under the Ontario Health funding envelope. We'll wait and see on that one. Ambulance Act Modernization remains outstanding and got sort of sidelined with COVID. Implementation of new models of care. I talked about that earlier about treat and refer, treat and release. I think those are critical to trying to stem some of the increase in our demand and to better serve our patients by trying to at least treat them in their homes and maybe discharge them in their homes and then have a follow-up with a community paramedic or their family health team, which is underway and I believe will be delivered to council till, March-ish of this year. Next, please. And, Madam Warden, through you, to members of your committee, so I'm happy to, take any questions.
Thank you, Chief. And just before we start, I think there's a common theme that we've been seeing so far, even on our second day, is that we are seeing people that have been dealing with, complex files in normal times, but now they aren't normal. And you're having to deal with those, but then you're also having to deal with opportunities that are presenting as well. So not only are you trying to maintain, but you're also being creative in the other opportunities. And we recognize that and thank you for the hard work that you've been doing with that.
Thank you. I gotta, acknowledge that, the team that's here, but, really, as well as the frontline team, have been extraordinary under extremely, straining times. To be honest, nobody imagined that 2 years later we'd still be in COVID, that they would have the demand, the pressures, not only at work, but with their home lives and how it's impacted everyone. But I'm just amazed each and every day with, team as a whole has rallied and continues.
Right, opening it up to the floor. Councillor Robb?
Thank you. Through the warden, just a comment. I've had the opportunity to see these numbers before, but just to point out the insurance costs and how they've jumped. We've all seen costs jump in insurance, but land ambulance has gone from $286 for the vehicle insurance to $480,000. I mean, those are huge numbers, and it's just part of the impact that's been on it. But I just wanted to point out those insurance numbers.
Add anything to that? Colin is our sort of insurance guru.
Oh. I've heard you called things before, but insurance guru is not it. Go for it. That should be good.
I'll take that name. Okay. Yeah, through the morning. We continue to talk to our insurance broker. I mean, there's a couple of things that really continue to drive our costs in our MS. We have some ongoing outstanding civil claims, and that does drive the premium up. We also have our accident and our vehicle that we put 1.4 million kilometers on our vehicle. When we look at insurance systems, like, they definitely as a risk factor, and just general liability as they assess us, as our very harshly just do the type of driving. So it's something that we're in our sector, but there's not a lot of relief coming, and to expect these.
Follow up. Thank you. And it is on the call volume that we talk about all the time. Do you see that unless there's a change to what you're called, the calls that you're called out to, without a change in that and how they're dispatched, that they will continue to rise, keep rising? Is that the only answer to it, like to a change in what you're called out to?
Question through you, Madam Warden. As I've said before, I think throughout my 40-odd years, the big issue that I see day in and day out is that the entry to our healthcare system is our current system, which is for 40-odd years, is a call into the dispatch sends a transport. And the business case that this council did would actually act as a system navigator. Better triaging the calls. Triaging tool that was approved under the former government still has not been implemented on service. Outstanding, even upgrading their computer-assisted dispatch software as a. So the big area that really needs to happen hand comes into the dispatch center. They require an emergency. They require a community paramedic. Can the call be better triaged to make maybe dispatch community. Could the call be transferred through to the family health team? Better follow up. And that's the problem right now is that I may have shared this with some of the council weeks ago. Our system was to the point that calls in the queue when we wanted to deploy our community paramedics. We would roster them on as a 911. And the old ways of doing things are not helpful. That's why gain Middlesex support for the business case on reform could be better integrated. It doesn't need to go to emerge. That's the problem. And again, the emerge is getting the walk-ins coming in, and 10 or 11 ambulances at the Victoria site, which are being drowning the system. And it's about better utilization of the resource. And again, if we can deal with somebody who may be dehydrated and can have an IV started in their home and then discharged, versus coming into emerge, sitting for hours on our stretcher, waiting to be transferred over, to be given that IV, and then having to find a way to get back home. That's not a good use of the healthcare system, and that's your vision as well, and I support. Hopefully, again, we're here when we need to be, but at times I think we need to prioritize as to what are the proper responses.
Councillor Burkhardt and then Councillor DeVete.
Thank you. Through the warden. Just on that, Neil, I think you and we talked about it last week when I saw you at the vaccine clinic. Obviously, there won't be any decisions made on dispatch on our business case until after the election. I think at this stage, I think we can all agree on that. But again, it sounds like a broken record in looking at how the last 2 years have highlighted issues facing our healthcare system. It's like the right hand isn't talking to the left hand. So you say 911's an entry point into our hospital system. So do we have the support of the hospital system to, should we be together going to whatever government of the day is to say, this is the issue? Because I mean, they get the same messaging out. They send the same messaging out about, if you've, just got a twisted ankle, don't call 911, don't come to emerge, sort of thing. Is there more that we can be doing jointly with our healthcare partners to try and move forward on something, changes?
Thank you, Madam Warren. So excellent question. Absolutely. And in discussions with London Health Sciences and their new president, Pfeiffer Taylor, they are supportive because ultimately a revision or a modernization of how the calls are dispatched and how the calls are addressed helps them, helps us, but ultimately helps the patients and is better health care. And the big challenge is that the ministry right now has for all these years owned all the system and control all the system, and it's like a slow moving machine. It's the right thing to do. The ministers recognize that. Unfortunately, COVID has sort of delayed it, but I think it's also highlighted the need for the changes that we've all said and that we've recognized. And as we emerge out of this, I think this is the time to continue that partnership that you've identified with our hospital partners, because even on offloads, they need some relief. Us not transporting everybody to the emergency department helps them better manage the strain on their system. And you saw that when we did the mental health diversion as well. If there's little bits and pieces that we can manage and better deal with, it helps everybody. And so I would encourage council, as you move forward on the dispatch business case, that the partnership be enlarged to advocate jointly for it. I think that will help push it forward and speak more volume.
And then just pivoting off of that, since I've been on council, this budget has, like many others, has continued to increase. And so much of it is reacting to obviously the circumstances of the day, the increased call volume, all of that. And I guess I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if looking into your crystal ball, is there anything that you see coming down the horizon that is going to impact our budget, our costs, that we can do a better job of preparing for and being aware of?
So, looking down the road to better prepare, what I would recommend and suggest is your continued support and advocacy for system reform. That, again, the calls are increasing every year, but and I think the need for healthcare access will continue, but not necessarily through the 911 or through the increase of adding more transport ambulances. I think better healthcare through Ontario Health and their work with the health teams to ensure more community-based care, more comprehensive care, and that patients aren't getting some care and then having to call an ambulance repeatedly and go into emerge repeatedly and be admitted repeatedly. I think that's going to be important as well. And that's what's driving part of this as well, is that in the absence of a comprehensive healthcare system, then it will default back to what is easy. I can't get in to see my family physician or a family health team, so I'm going to go to emerge, or I'm going to call 911. I think that's where Middlesex on Paramedic Service with Middlesex County and working with the Ontario Health teams and the province can help address some of those issues. I would much prefer to see the investment in proactive care versus reactive care. We have to legislatively react to the demand on the system. You don't control, as I said earlier, the entry point and what resources being sent to the patient. And that's the areas that you don't control. You don't control offloads either. But we can help mitigate those through better resources going to the patients, limiting the amount of resources or ambulances going to the emergency department, and better working as a partner with Lana. That's the big challenge. And again, we're not going to make these changes ourselves. Collectively and in partnership.
Thank you for that presentation and the questions. I think I'm beating the same drum. The wicked problem, it's not a simple one, and the variables that need to be, the levers, the variables that need to be adjusted are many. You need an integrated approach to this. You can't, I keep looking at the budget here and going, we're not. How can the government not realize that it's not bad management at this level, problem that is affecting every single service across the province and across Canada? Everybody always comes back to, well, we have great health system in Canada, that and the other thing, and then compare ourselves to the U.S. And really, what is that? That is a comparison of number 23 in the world to number 37 in the world. There are like another 25% above us. There are models out there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel for everything. Your point, to the extent we can keep advocating, but unless anyone's listening or has the intestinal fortitude to actually step back, these dollars are going to keep increasing every single time you're here to present, and we're not going to be any further ahead. I mean, dispatch thing, sort of like my first term coming to an end, and this hasn't changed at all, not a bit. And it's common sense and logical, and not everyone needs an ambulance. So my question would be like, is there anything we can do? So you've already answered that. It was just the same kind of vein and frustration with what we have to look at every year and the decisions. And it's coming out of that pot. Like, so I don't even know where to begin, to be honest. It's like pulling your hair out, which is not my job. I know I have to figure this out. We have to look at it, but I just wanted to vent. Thank you for listening.
Okay, CEO Raper.
I have good news for Ina, I think. I guess I see all the challenges that are being talked about as not that insurmountable. And, you talked about people listening and how important that is, and it really is. I do see the formation of the Ontario health teams, as painful as the first couple of months have been, the real broad step forward into community-based care. And I wouldn't necessarily judge the rise in the ambulance budget as, and I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying generally, I wouldn't necessarily judge the rise in the ambulance-based budget as a negative. In fact, it could be an extreme positive, especially if it's in the areas of proactive paramedicine. And the good news is the province is invested in that. The province knows that every dollar they invest in community paramedicine is multiple dollars they're saving at the back end. The reason I think that they're listening, and the reason I think they're going to continue to listen, at least this government is going to continue to listen, is that they are being forced to think about they can't sustain the costs of primary-based healthcare, which is in a hospital. And, you know, if you put all of those factors together, there really have been some pretty amazing positive developments. And Kathy keeps going back to the point we have to learn from this. Well, they're learning in real time what would have taken decades to figure out without the pandemic. We're getting access on things and learning things in real time, not us, but the province and us, about what works and doesn't work in real time. It's like being in a war zone and you can theorize about all the things you're going to do in a war, but when you're in the heat of the battle, you learn and adapt faster. And we are. Like, I think there's good news coming out of this in that I think the province is going to look around and say, it's impossible to survive another one of these by only focusing on primary care. It's impossible to survive this again without a solid community paramedicine that is months ahead of a problem that might arrive at the hospital door. And so I'm starting to see those investments. And I think, if anything, we need to, you know, we're going to talk about communications at some point in our budget, but this is why this is really important to me, that we need to communicate not only internally, but externally. Hey, province, there is a solution to this problem, and it's not spending more dollars there. And you can download community paramedicine is great because it's downloading that. But I would actually be okay with this type of downloading if they said, we want to invest more collectively with, maybe that's going to get beeped out too. But Bill Rayburn would be okay with that kind of downloading because that would mean a better system if it was being invested in community paramedicine and we bought into it too. Because for a community like ours that is not primary-based care, we don't have like a big hospital in Glencoe and like a big massive multi-university hospital in Glencoe and another one in Ilderton and another one in Park Hill. That's not our type of community. Community paramedicine is like gold to us in the county, and I'd be willing to invest our own dollars in. And so I do see things on the horizon, even our vaccination program, how it works, how that should work for flus and other things in the future. There's that might have taken an expert panel, a decade of a consultant's report, a special advisor, and they're happening in real time. And I'm like, so I guess from my seat, I'm like, okay, it's not perfect, but things are happening. And, you know, the fact that the premier is as focused as he is on land ambulance right now, because of everything that's going on. Imagine if the pandemic hadn't happened. How much of his time or cabinet time would have actually been on paramedic services? It would have been about shuffling the deck chairs on boundaries and other garbage that doesn't really benefit the taxpayer. Community paramedicine benefits the taxpayer. So I'm actually pretty excited, especially about that, because I think they are listening and we have their attention, but I'm also excited about the stuff that we're doing internally over there to look at how we do things. Not just the ORH report or the 5-year plan is going to be very critical to how we organize ourselves. Like Kathy asked a great question. How are you going to get, she didn't say it this way, but how are we going to get less expensive in certain areas going forward? We have to look internally about how we operate in these times, because these times are not going to end. It's going to be something else tomorrow and something else the next day. So I'm pretty optimistic, actually, about where things are headed, and I see some of these dollars being spent as long overdue, and the attention that's being attributed to it as long overdue. So I'm pretty excited.
That's good news. I'm glad to hear that there's that the right solution dollars are that are being spent.
Exactly, yep.
So to get that community, it's not a pilot, it's
And community paramedicine is all about early intervention. Like,
Exactly.
my mother saw a community paramedic, and they said, hey, have you ever thought of that you might need to go get your hearing tested, or that, like, there's
all the preventative.
there's all the preventative pieces around it, and that's going to get tested. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that's the part where we can do a lot of advocacy, say this is happening on the ground, this is what our residents are saying, this is why they're pleased. It needs to happen faster.
And I think just going on to that theme, and I see Kathy, your hand up. That was something over the weekend, over the 2 days that we had at Roma, talking to the different ministers throughout. Not the pandemic made us work on this. The pandemic made us take a spotlight and put it on childcare because it is necessary. So things that keep getting pushed to the back burner came to the forefront, and it was the opportunity to be able to take it and run with it and make sure that they understand. And I'm going to tell you, when talking to those ministers, they appreciate the communication from the ground up, because it really helps them with the policies that they're trying to get in. So at this point in time, I think never has municipal committees initiated by the province, because they've really needed us to be able to steer them through what's been going on. So it's a great opportunity for us, especially with the upcoming election. Now's the time to get our ducks in the row and say, this is really important. This is what the future is, and we've defined it. Kathy, go ahead.
No, just like, I would wholeheartedly agree with everything you just said, Bill. I think that we have an incredibly innovative, collaborative paramedic system for Middlesex, London. And I would, much like the IT department, I would hold it up as the gold standard. I'm not convinced that every other paramedic service across the province is as perhaps, advanced, as open to innovation as we are. And the things that we've been able to do, we're lucky in that we've had opportunity to have the Premier's ear, to have the Minister of Health's ear. And those that's great, we've got these partnerships. But we have to make sure that our story is always being told, that our successes are always being shared, because if we want there to be change from the top down, like, our story has to be the one that's always being presented. Because I'm not convinced that the work that we do with community paramedicine is the same, is happening in communities, in other communities. And the successes that we're having are not necessarily the successes that are being felt in other communities. And so we have to make sure that if this is what we see as the gold standard, if this is what we see as, being part of a comprehensive healthcare system, that we're telling that story in order to make those changes. Because, again, as we've been saying over the last 2 years, it's highlighted healthcare is reactive, not proactive, and how do you change that? And we have to be the ones to tell that story.
On the communication warden, right? Like, because it's also, there's going to be a lot of review of system design, and like, if you think about what we've been through and you talk about, like, I won't talk about our neighbors, but I mean, if you're in a different system, let's say you're in a contractor model, what incentive is there for you to go out and do, to the Dr. Orker plant in London with a vaccine clinic to try and get people vaccinated with shifts? That's a whole new amendment to your agreement. That's a whole new cost to you. Where we can redeploy resources in different areas because of our system design. And so the province needs to know that. Like, whenever these things happen, we don't need to talk about what happened somewhere else, but we can talk about the advantages of a system design that is the gold standard, where county council and the city, we ask the city too, what are your priorities? And we can react to those. We can say, here's the priorities, and react to them. You can't do that in some other systems designs, or it takes a long time, or it costs a lot compared to how we were able to do it because we could be more flexible in our system design. So you're right. I mean, other systems would not have allowed for the flexibility to do 90% of the extra things we've done over the past. This thing that's really great too, if I can have one more minute, Warden, is our relationship with the health unit has dramatically improved through the COVID as well. And again, it's sort of that in the heat of battle, a lot of the leadership that we've worked with now understands in the heat of battle how important that relationship is. Whereas before it was, in my view, again, this might get beat, but in Bill Rayburn's view, it was two separate entities. But now we're working together in so many areas. The new leadership that's there has really wanted that integration. And that's been a great, if we're looking for good news that's out there, the ability of all these agencies to come together in times of crisis in a way that they never have before and rely upon each other and trust each other to get a job done is, we've seen it, Kathy, and you have too, Warden, firsthand, just how integrated those services are now and how they rely upon each other. And that's great. We rely upon Alex, and they rely upon, and his team, and they rely upon us, and that's really great.
Again, we can use the Sopranos clip
Oh, no.
as a testament to leadership.
Yes.
Cindy?
Yeah, thanks for the chair. I just wonder, I think it's important that we point out the funding from the province. So we have used an assumption here that we would get the same kind of funding formula that we have in the past. And I'm not sure if Chief Roberts wants to talk about that briefly.
I guess the only comment, thank you, through you, Madam Warden, to members of the committee. This year, obviously, is a little different because obviously we're in an election year on a provincial basis. And I'm not sure on the timelines for the budget. Historically, we receive our funding announcement or envelope in August or just before AMO of each year. And so with the provincial election coming into play, I have no intel to suggest we're not going to see that change. However, we need to wait obviously until after the election. I'm not hearing we're going to receive our funding envelope before the election. Again, even if the budget is tabled in the legislature, I'll say before March 31st, it still requires the various ministries to then take apart the big funding envelope for, say, health, then to notify the different divisions. And obviously, depending on what the outcome of the election is, the budget may be upheld or may not be upheld, could be a different budget. So obviously this year, where these are projections, as Treasurer has said, we're going to go based upon our past experience and assume that the past is a predictor of the future. But I've no, intel that would suggest otherwise, but obviously there's a lot of unknown.
That's a big frustration for the city, and rightfully so. I'm like, our relationship with the city also is something that's improved over the last couple of years, of them understanding the financial picture for land ambulance. I think that's improved dramatically. And kudos to Cindy and Neil and some others over there and Colin and helping with that. But it is frustrating to the city because the number one factor that affects what they pay in their budget is that provincial contribution. Not really assessment, it's not even really sort of what our upcoming budget number is going to be. It's really that provincial number, and there's nothing we can do about it. And they like to have sort of a predictor of what things are going to. So signaling is that may not be possible, and also this is a time period where we ran into trouble with the city last time. It was right when there was a new election. There was a lot of people that came on and, oh my God, look at the size of the budget for land ambulance. They also had private conversation about the size of the social housing budget, but they were talking about the land ambulance a lot. And so this is why I'm saying our relationship with the administration, the city's advanced a lot. That going, communication is going to be very critical in these next couple of months to talk about, because even people that are running for election, we need to early and often about how does the land ambulance budget work? What does it mean? All these different things. We have to get way out in front this year as opposed to it landing with someone else telling our story, which would be, someone at the telling our story. We've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important to communicate. There's always that lag behind of the funding, and also on how can you tell people not to, we're out of money, don't call an ambulance anymore. So they have to understand it is a number that's moving all the time. Okay, any other comments, Cindy?
Through the chair, I just want to point out that the approach that we are taking this year is very similar to what other municipalities are taking. So we're not leading on that, but I just thought that was important that we are following best practices.
Here where we probably have the most unknowns, and it's not just the one that's been mentioned, right? We have also the 5-year strategic plan. What's going to come out of there? Is that going to say that we need to start putting more capital away for different logistics stations in different spots? Is it going to talk about management structure? Is it going to talk about all those things? So that's another thing. We also have a lot of unknowns because of call volume and what's going to happen if we are ever going to see post-COVID. What's that going to go lower or stay the same? What trajectory is it going to be on? There are so many unknowns in this. Neil mentioned the provincial budget. You can point to every aspect of that budget and the variance that is in my brain between what you see and what it could be higher than it ever has been before. So this is one that, makes me the best guess, as Cindy and Neil have said, this is the best guess you can possibly get. But it does make me nervous just because there's so many unknowns and big unknowns.
Councillor DeVete?
Thank you. Those comments just reminded me, Chief was presenting, one of the comments you made was, and the reserves are nearly depleted. You share, I was wondering, could you share your thoughts or perspective on that number versus the other? Having a reserve is causing concern.
Through the chair, I'll start, but then either the CAO or Chief Roberts can chime in. You will notice that, remember last year in October, the chief came forward and indicated that he needed additional funds for land ambulance, so we did approve it. So there was a portion that was funded by Middlesex and a portion that was funded by London. At that time, we recommended to you not to use the reserve fund. So as we go forward, I would say from a treasurer's point of view, I also recommend that you're not using the reserve funds. There's not a lot of money in those to cover, I would say, big increases. They are for emergencies. So for the county, we probably would refer back to the tax rate stabilization, and then we'd have to have discussions with the City of London, what their portion would be for something like that, which is a very similar approach as what we've seen from the City of London for our social housing.
Yeah, and so that's a perfect answer. With the only thing I'd add to that is because of financial management, right? And getting the province to contribute their part. If we were to create reserves in advance, the province wouldn't be contributing to that because they don't contribute to reserve generation. It's not great, like, there's a lesson learned right there that we could add to the list. That's not great financial management for the service or for the municipalities. That's not the way municipal government should operate. You should have a reserve that you described to do it. But the funding formula that the province uses does not really, it's a disincentive to create them. So you end up having to react financially, really shouldn't be as a municipal finance. So there's no incentive for municipalities to do that. There's definitely an understanding with the city that that's not the best for either municipality to go and create bigger reserves, or some reserves that would actually be substantial to. Yeah, it's just a function of the way the province funds, and we should be highlighting that for them actually, because I think that for services now of this size and importance, like if you look at the size of the service in terms of complexity and everything else, in terms of what size it is, the health unit made a good argument to the province about how they needed to have reserves when they weren't allowed to about 8 or 9 years ago. I think ambulance probably needs to be talking to the province about allowing the creation of reserves to a certain extent, like to a percentage, the same way the health unit did, because their complexity is no more complex than this service, and in terms of the need is in a similar spot.
Yeah, and I think, relating back to those reserves, we can look back to Walkerton to say that incident made us take water reserves, wastewater reserves, and have the province come in and really make sure that the money was there and that it was spent the right way. So, again, it's a big thing to make change.
Yeah. We're in a little different circumstance than other municipalities. And maybe we're unique in this regard, but I mean, being a Middlesex London service, you can't just say to our council, hey, you have to put away this amount of reserves in case of this problem happening. You have to have a conversation with two councils. It takes two to tango on creating a reserve. And so, like in the Walkerton example, it was each municipality had to do that. In our case, it's where it would be better if the province allowed us to create those for funding, and would save a lot of conversation.
Through the chair, I also like to remind the budget committee, as we're going forward, Chief Roberts, and that'll be a big initiative as we move forward, because 2022 is the last year of their 4-year budget. So they're coming into a new council and also with the 4-year, which is very difficult as we move with a new provincial government, how we're going to be able to project some of these numbers.
Any other comments? Brian?
Just a short comment to that. We have been caught, and that has been some of the impact on our using reserves, was when the city went to their first 4-year budgets, and the communication wasn't as good as it is now. So it is, I think the key is here, the communication on those reserves, because we had to. I think,
Councillor, and to echo Cindy's comments, she raises a good point. The issue with a newly elected provincial government, back to our last 4 years. Obviously, there was change, and with change, as Bill and Cindy have said, folks have identified, it's about communication. We've got good, strong communication, but as well, it's about a cycle.
All right, so welcome back, and welcome to our county engineer, Chris Trainey, who will be starting with the transportation budget.
Madam Warden, I'll just wait for that screen. Okay. I told City that I forgot my glasses, so I'm just going to open this machine here very shortly, but I should know this one off by heart at this point. That's something to do with this. I see. Okay, yep, I've got it here. So again, we still have a team of about 50 staff who are responsible for about over 1,600 lane kilometers of road and over 250 bridges. I think we're at 253 bridges now after the last road and bridge assumption study. We also operate in conjunction with Strathroy Caradoc Police Department, the fire radio communication system in the county, and we manage the county emergency management department and our SERV volunteers who met a number of times over the last months or years with their involvement with the vaccine rollout across our county. And we also have a contract with the City of London for household hazardous waste drop-off for our residents at the... Here's what we do in a year. We do road maintenance. One of our big activities is maintaining our... We also maintain our traffic signal system, patch asphalt that needs to be done to keep our roads in safe operating condition. Just over $16.5 million per year in capital works based on sound asset management practices. Maintain our current level of service for our roads, and for level of service, that's really a definition about the quality of the road network and the quality of our bridge network. And our fleet has about 80 pieces of equipment in it right now, including large and small trucks, graders, loaders, excavators, paper, trailers, everything you can think of. Why we do it again, it's about maintenance of a safe, efficient, and structurally sound and connected road system. That's for the vitality of our community and the safe and efficient movement of people across the county. Community safety through provision of emergency preparedness services and fire radio communications. You can see safety in here is one for us. Again, it's similar to other utilities that are provided across the county. The road network, is the system by which our strong agricultural community continues to operate. And reasons that we see business and residential continue to thrive because we have a safe, efficiently operating road network. So COVID, especially for the county roads department, we've continued to operate as normal through COVID. Again, many of the restrictions that were put in place over the pandemic have really been mindful of the fact that we need to continue to provide our services to the traveling public. We can't just shut down and not provide winter maintenance. There's a huge impact on us to defer or to stop any road construction or any of our bridge construction that was happening when the pandemic first hit a couple of years ago. So we've continued to operate our normal practices. We do take steps to put our staff into pods. Council knows we run out of 4 main districts in the county. And we've tried to do our best to keep our staff isolated within their districts and limit the amount of cross-contamination is a bad word, but sort of crossing into each other's work areas. So normally our staff get to enjoy a little bit of a changing work environment through the summer and even through the winter to some extent. And that's sort of stopped at this point just to try to protect everyone spread of COVID throughout the county. And then we're seeing additional expenditures in emergency management. You'll see that again in this year's budget. Just expecting a little bit more of Bettina Weber's time, some more contributions through John Elston, just some additional costs for us to continue to maintain the SERV team. because of the on. Slide, please. For our 2022 service highlights, and you'll see that some of this and continues on from our 2021 highlights, but there's some new things on here. We're continuing to invest, and thanks to council support and our Middlesex County cycling strategy, we saw the first hard infrastructure installed last year, partly in Middlesex Center and Thames Center, and that's going to continue this year. Our main project is going to be in North Street from Center Road up to Elsa Craig. Is going to be shoulders as part of our road rehabilitation program. We are slowly moving forward with the construction of our first roundabout at Enoch, Jeffries, and Glendon Drive. Just a few hiccups along the way with some of the archaeological work we needed to do, but this year with relocations and much of the work surrounding that intersection. This year we've got 79 lane kilometers of roads and 6 bridge structures for rehabilitation or reconstruction. Through our modernization funding, we're implementing our digital asset management and maintenance management software. Going to help us track the condition of our assets in a more active way. And the maintenance management program is going to help us, again, to understand where we're spending our dollars with regards to service requests that will be able to be implemented through that system, and just a more robust way for us to track our patrol schedule, especially through the winter. Traffic signals this year, as of last county council meeting, were approved for Wonderland Road and Ilderton Road. A number of intersections, but this is the one that's going this year. We are finishing off a couple of other intersections, namely Crestview and Glendon Drive should be done early spring of this year, but we'll get on to next. And then a number of partnerships with local municipalities for urban renewals, Amesbury Line and Alice Street in Lucan, just starting the first steps of Main Street and Elsa Craig, as well as Main Street and Park Hill. So opportunities, these are all great opportunities that continue to be here. Leveraging of funding opportunities, I'll talk a little bit about changes through the OSIF funding, which is a good news story for us. But again, always monitoring opportunities for us to access funding programs through the provincial and federal government. Last year, we received over $211,000 or so for the first steps of our cycling program, and we'll continue this year. Doing a great job in improving those partnerships and staff relationships between the county and local municipalities. We actually had a meeting just this morning, local public works directors, and we continue to touch base on at least a monthly basis or so, and that really helps us with moving opportunities for, now we're talking about asset management type opportunities and sharing those expertise ourselves to help each other with our asset management plans, but also joint purchasing. Of course, we're including some work under the county tenders for asphalt paving with some of the local municipalities. So those types of partnerships serve both the county and the local municipalities and the taxpayers as well. Road staff efficiencies and really more about road staff. Talked a little bit already today about succession planning. We're having some pretty major changes within our road staff at the senior level. So we're looking to bring people forward through the system, and we actually have been management roles. And now that our staff, once COVID restrictions start to lift again and we're able to be out at Central Garage altogether, we'll be able to have our technical staff work much more efficiently and closely with our operational staff out of that facility. And modernization, again, this is a big program for us with the asset management and the maintenance management system. Opportunities for COVID-19 continues to be a challenge, especially right now. We're having some challenges operationally with COVID and keeping our staff isolated. Again, with winter maintenance, it can be very challenging for us, but we are being mindful of that impact for our operations in 2022. Succession planning, I can go into more detail on that. Our road superintendent is retiring this year, So we are having some movement internally to positions, but now we have to look next people in line after that group of folks moves forward in the station. Then asset management, there's another benchmark that we have to meet later this summer with regards to our asset management plans for our core assets. It needs to be provided to the province later in this. We're just waiting for asset management wide program training to be completed, and then my engineering supervisor and his team are going to that information into that system, which should give us the core of that asset management plan that needs. So we're seeing our budget highlights here. All of you know about inflationary costs. So our operating costs are increased to account for the inflationary increases. Every day this number seems to be too low, but we put that 4%, probably in the ballpark, but we are seeing some record highs for fuel costs and for our estimated asphalt costs going forward. Then our union and non-union negotiated salary increases. The union negotiated salary increases for most of our roads staff is 1.9%. Capital program, again, got expanded last year through the investment into the Middlesex bridge. That continues. Our bridge funding, and thanks to this committee and prior committees and council as a whole to bring us up to where I think we need to be right now at about $4.5 million investment into our bridge infrastructure. It's going to continue to be a challenge for us, but at a good level for 2022. Again, just overall dollars for the roads department, not a big number, but again, the impact of COVID-19 on our emergency management expenditures for 2022. That's that. I'm happy to go through the budget, just talk about some of the wings in the budget here. See, the overall change in the county levy is just over just shy of $206,000, and the reason that is low is that we saw more than a doubling in the formula-based component for our OSIF funding. Won't do this enough, but we should be mindful and thankful for the province for recognizing the need and the importance of this type of sustainable funding. This formula-based funding component really allows for municipalities to invest where they find the best value for that money, and of course that will be directly invested back into our road rehabilitation program. There is reporting criteria we need to meet to spend that money, but it all qualifies under the work that we're doing on our road and bridge assets. The federal gas tax funding did increase back in 2021, and there's another scheduled increase for next year, but it's a more gradual increase in versus the OSIF, which again about $690,000 in additional funding. So the overall change in our budget, the increase is about 3.37%. Again, that's based generally on our 4% estimated increase for material costs and approximately 2% increase for labor costs. As council knows that we really try to have a philosophy whereby we maintain a level of staffing and level of fleet that allows us to operate 365 days a year. So our staff who are in the summertime, they may be cutting grass or helping with road construction or working on our bridge crews, are trained to get into a snow plow, snow and spread salt and sand, provide winter maintenance activities in the winter season. So we continue to maintain that. So really my philosophy for budget is just making sure we're allocating those staff hours and equipment hours in the right areas. Really not a big swing otherwise one way or the other, additional investment. We've only ever added, in my time with the county over the last 20 years, we've added one full-time employee, and that employee is there to manage our sign shop. You'll see some increase in our sign budget as we're moving forward with some of the cycling signage and some other signage improvements that we've past number of years. I can highlight some of the we can go through anything that we would like to talk about as far as what the capital budget goes, but if we go down to the bottom under our transfers, really that's how we've been operating our capital budget over the last number of years. So you can see a big jump from 2020 to 2021, and that's the start of the investment in the Middlesex County cycling strategy. That's why that number jumped up. We're looking at about a $64 million investment into that project over the next 20 or so years. As council knows, we don't just build the cycling lanes, we add them to the capital rehabilitation projects as they come up in our regular rehabilitation cycle, simply because it just makes for more sound infrastructure and also greatly reduces the cost of construction of that infrastructure. This year, the increase to the transfer roads capital is 1.5%. That may likely not continue to be sufficient, but for 2022, I think fine, and that's what our current 5-year capital plan is designed to operate with, is the 1.5% year-to-year increase. The other one that's not a typical increase was included in here as an increase to our transfer to equipment capital by about 4%, 3.75%. We're having a lot of trouble in seeing pretty significant increase in costs with the supply of our equipment. We're seeing especially our smaller equipment, our pickup trucks, are starting to come in way over what we estimated within our budget, and simply the supply is not available. The supply and demand of those types of equipment has really increased our costs in that area. On a high level, if we look under the operating costs, road maintenance, a mix of the 2% and the 4% puts us at about 3.5% increase as that whole line item goes through that philosophy I just explained about utilizing staff and equipment. The bridge and culvert maintenance about 4%, a little bit more concerned with the cost of material there than the labor costs, which is why we're closer to the 4% number than the 3.5%. Overhead, we talked about this previously. A lot of that number is insurance. We've seen significant increases to our insurance costs. I think Neil and his team did a good job explaining why. We struggle, but what we do is really a high risk type activity. We operate in an environment where we certainly are seeing exposure, as we always have, to very high dollar claims for motor vehicle collisions in the county, and the number of those claims has seemed to have increased just through the fact that people are more willing, it seems, to initiate lawsuits against the county when there's collision on our road network. The other side that we're seeing as well is through what's been explained to us through our insurer, is more claims that could be attributed to climate change and extreme weather events. They are feeling a pinch from their end about those types of claims coming in and being paid, and subsequently, we are paying an increased cost for the supply of insurance in that sense. That, I think, Madam, high level overview of the county roads budget. Shouldn't be any big surprises in this budget for anyone this year. Very fortunate and thankful to the province of Ontario for the increase in the OSIF funding, which allows us to come in with our budget asked for just under 1% increase from 2021.
Thank you. And I'd like to open up the floor now to any questions or comments regarding the presentation. Councillor Roth?
Thank you. Through the warden, Chris, we're talking about the increased cost of the cycling, but is there an increase with the heavy equipment that's going over, heavy farm equipment that's going over, and the truck traffic? I think we've talked about this. Will this increase the life expectancy of the roads because they're not breaking the corners? And will that help in the long run to be some savings at least?
Yeah, through the warden, I mean, this was part of the criteria that I made sure that our consultant was aware of when we signed our county cycling strategy, which was there's an additional benefit simply to simply the cyclist. Having a wider road platform, as you say, increases the durability of our roads because we have farm vehicles and other large vehicles staying on the platform. That also increases the safety for those vehicles. On gravel, one wheel on asphalt. Gives us a little bit more time for someone to lane correct if they've started to go they're off-road, they have a little bit more time to lane correct. It reduces our maintenance costs. So you can see our shoulder maintenance costs for year to year are fairly significant. We should see those numbers start to come down as we get more shoulders. And then other users, right? So not just cyclists, but people who want to walk along the side of the road, people who want to push strollers or rollerblade or those types of things. A multi-function.
And I guess if, again, that's, I was making, I know we're investing into it right now, but there's some real good advantages going forward.
Just a comment while everybody's reviewing their packages. I actually have looked at a lot of budgets, but not as much as some of the others have. But I've never seen a line item for jury duty before in the. It must be a common thing.
It all comes down to the way we've always done business in the roads department is we do job cost accounting. So anytime anything is allocated to any project, we account for that. So part of all of our benefits are job cost accounted, but these other things here are not part of that additional benefit cost. So when we do have staff, you know, hope they utilize their employee assistance program, but if they go on jury duty, we saw an overrun last year on sick time. Obviously, with COVID, with more people taking sick time off, the bank has gone down. Our employees are generally pretty good about sick time and avoiding taking time off, but we saw a jump in that last year, and we expect it to be a little bit higher this year, but it should settle back down to our sort of normal levels side of COVID-19.
Councillor DeVete?
You reminded me with the jury question that there was the sick.
Councillor Burkhart-Jessen?
Great, thank you. And through the warden, I was glad to hear, Chris, that you brought up looking for other funding, because rightly so, we've got this sustainable OSIP program. But just seeing what some of the other neighbors have been able, I'm pleased to see that, you know, funding can be there, you know, for our cycling to offset.
Warden, I should just mention on that we are signed on with a number of local municipalities for joint funding. Main Street Reconstruction, we're partners with that. We're partners with traffic signals the last couple of years, but you know, we are looking at opportunities. Alice Street, if there are some funding there. You know, we're there to support, and I think it helps to have that support for programs that impact road infrastructure at the local level are supported by the county, almost without question. So, and that's why we get these great partnerships. You know, we're talking about this year on Park Hill Main Street, there's about $1 million commitment by the county into that project. It's a long project, but there's traffic signal installation, there's new roads, new curbs. It also allows the municipality to refresh their water main, their sewer, their sewers as well along that stretch. So it's good, and it's good funding, and it reduces the overall cost to everybody involved. And I think we're stronger. We're stronger working together than trying.
I think too, for the end user of it, seeing, you know, both the county and the local municipality together. You're ripping up the road this year, and in 2 years you were going to have to look at, you know, water mains. You know, looking at it together, efficiency and in the long.
And that's something that we saw in the King Street project too, and that was a long time coming, but we were able to work together on it. Councillor Ross?
Thank you. Just on your point, Kathy, that I think the transparency between Chris, you mentioned it, but the transparency between the lower tier and the county is so much better. I know that Park Hill Main Street was due to be paved, I think, in 2019, and the county held off. There's the odd pothole because of it, but I mean, the county held off so that we could make this work. And in the past, we know that we've seen new roads that have been dug up because there's been infrastructure underneath it. And so hopefully that all falls together, but it is because working together on it.
Thank you, Warden. You to Chris. You mentioned the just under 15%. You covered that when you were going through. I'm not sure if you did or didn't. I missed it if you did.
No, but I am happy to speak on that. So we're seeing a couple of things in fire dispatch. So one of the things that we've been trying to account for, and we're still negotiating with the local municipal fire departments, is burn permits. So we've been picking up the cost of burn permits in an attempt to work with the local fire departments to modernize their system for burn permits. That's part of the contract that we signed with Strathroy Caradoc for the new dispatch contract for the next so many years. And then that also includes our year-to-year increase for the cost of delivering of that. That 13% is really accounting for, last year we did not account for the burn permit costs, and that's kind of back. We think we've got to do something to show what we're estimating it to be this year. Again, we're trying to work with each of the individual fire departments on a number of fronts for dispatch and communication services. One is modernization to a digital communications system, which is going to require some of the fire departments to upgrade their communication equipment. Similarly to what Councillor Robb just said about deferring us moving forward with our program, we're deferring moving forward with that change until all of the local fire departments are ready for that change. So, it'd be nice to just, I get requests time, let's get moving with this, but we need to defer until everyone is ready. It would be fair to change to a system where we're leaving the fire department out from part of that communications protocol. We also have what's called NG 911, and they explain it to me every time, and it goes over my head. But simply, it's the change to dispatch, so that dispatchers will be able to receive not only a voice call, but a text or a video or a photo directly to dispatch. Change in the system that we have to do. We're not directly paying for it. It's coming from the dispatch center themselves or absorbing that cost. But it's a change in another way that we're doing service delivery. That's going to be a challenge this year at some point. Live, and they keep changing the date, obviously, down. But it's just showing you how we're seeing modernization across every department in the county, and this is one of the things where it's going to be a very interesting rollout. Very, very interesting to see. Of a car on fire or something, and that they'll be able to find the location where that video was taken, that information to the dispatchers who will be able to dispatch fire crews to that location without ever speaking to anyone. All those things are we're contemplating as far as our service. And the maintenance agreement is for us to maintain our fire radio communication system, which is separate from dispatch. We have infrastructure on a number of towers, water towers, and buildings across the City of London and the county. It allows us to communicate from one central operations center to a first responder basically anywhere in the county, and that system requires updating and replacement of hardware, software upgrades, and then just service hours for service calls to have that replaced. But like any electronics, we're seeing a significant cost of those electronics, which is why that number is about $5,000 a year.
Councillor Robb?
Just one more question, Chris, and I see there's quite a number of bridge projects going. This is just going to be the new norm, is it not? Like there's just every year we're going to see that number of bridges, or whatever the number, but I mean, get more instead of less.
Yeah, through the word and to Councillor Robb, I mean, I could talk for the next 4 hours about our struggles that we're going to see in our bridge infrastructure everywhere across Canada. But it's going to stretch our $4.5 million a year for sure. You know, we're at a $8 million bridge replacement at some point of the Thorndale Bridge. We have other big structures like that that are going to come up for renewal probably in the next 6 to 10 years. And then, as you know very well, you know, we've had this emergency repair on the Nairn Bridge, which is going to cost us, you know, another X hundreds of thousands of dollars, while we are already planning to replace Black's Bridge at a cost of over $2 million. So these are, you know, anyone who knows the Black's Bridge, it's a smallish structure that doesn't carry a whole lot of traffic, but it's an important piece of infrastructure that has a high price tag cost. And those types of structures are going to come up again. We're very lucky and very fortunate to have had support by council to invest in our staff, in the training of our staff, and in the maintenance of our fleet, that we can take on some of these jobs. We have 2 bridge rehabilitations on Egremont this coming summer, which will be done entirely with our own staff. And I would always say that, you know, our costs of going to the private sector or our own staff is certainly in the range of 35 to 40%, if not higher, just off the top, to go to the private sector versus the public sector. I've spent that number for a number of years, and I think it's money well invested in our team here at Middlesex County.
Just a final comment, all the bridges are not in North Middlesex, just so you all realize.
Well,
Everybody else has bridges too.
Just one other question, and that relates to the last topic of bridges and so forth. And you said in the next 10 to whichever years coming up, that will be tied to the asset management plan, and we'll have a plan, we'll know that it's coming more precisely. Thank you, that answers my question.
any other comments, questions? Cindy?
Through the chair to Mr. Trainee. So looking at your budget and the projections for 2021, if you remember in last year's budget, in order to reduce the levy increase, we looked at using some of the surplus from transportation in order to do that. And I just wondered at this point in time if you're comfortable with doing a strategy like that again, or do you have another suggestion for the committee?
Well, through the warden to Mrs. Howard. We certainly are very fortunate in 2021 that we again had a very mild winter that is going to give us a sizable surplus on our winter maintenance budget this year. And this year actually looking very good. Well, as I say that, we'll likely get snow for the next 6 weeks. So there is that opportunity that council has done in the past. I think we're completely out of the red in our winter maintenance reserve at this point in time. So it is always nice to have a little bit of a cushion in case we get a very terrible year for winter maintenance. But again, there's an opportunity on the budget to buy some of that surplus to reduce the overall impact to the
Any other comments? Any final comments? Okay, I think that concludes our presentation from the county engineer. And I think we're pretty well finishing on time. And like a mover for adjournment, please. Good, Brian. Mover, seconder, all in favor? Thank you.